Welcome to another episode of Marketing Tips for Doctors. I'm your host, Dr. Barbara Hales, and we're really very fortunate today because today we have none other than Callum Laing. He is a renowned entrepreneur, a board director, investor, and best-selling author with a passion for helping individuals reach their full potential. With a stellar record of building and scaling businesses across diverse industries, Callum brings a wealth of real-world directorship experience to the summit. His infectious enthusiasm, combined with a knack for simplifying complex concepts, ensures that attendees leave with actionable insights and strategies they can implement immediately. As a prolific author and thought leader, Callum's wisdom has been regularly featured in the media and is sought out by business leaders around the world. Welcome to the show, Callum.
Thank you, Barbara. Feel like I could have written that intro myself.
The first thing I wanted to know is how did you get involved with boards? How did that become an interest for you?
It started off when I was a young entrepreneur and I had absolutely no idea what I was doing, and I was not very good at it. And I just sort of wanted to learn, and I figured that a great way to learn would be to sit on the board of other people's companies, so I could see what they were doing right and what they were doing wrong, and I could meet other smart people. Uh, Um, the problem was I didn't really even know what a board was at that point. I just thought it would be something cool to get on and learn from. So I didn't know what a board was, didn't really have the knowledge. I didn't really have the people in my network that could help me get on that. And so I didn't get onto boards until many years later. And then I got on lots of boards. So what happened was my main business is mergers and acquisitions and taking companies public. And so I was sitting on a lot of the boards from companies that we were taking public. And I guess a lot of I had been, when I wasn't sitting on boards, I was quite enamored with boards. And then when I sat on boards, I got quite frustrated with boards. And I saw a lot of challenges. I saw a lot of people on boards for the wrong reasons, so just looking after their own self-interests rather than all the stakeholders. And I saw a lot of very talented people not being able to get onto boards because they didn't look the right way, they're wrong gender, they didn't have the right background, hadn't gone to the right schools, didn't know the right people. And so you just had a lot of talent missing from that pool, and that was very frustrating. And so as a member of several boards, I started implementing solutions to get more new people into that fold. And ultimately that became the business of the Veblen Director program, which is training women, minorities, and first timers how to get their first board seats. And because once you're on the board ladder, it's actually relatively easy to move up the board ladder. It's just getting on there in the first place, which is the challenge.
Well, I do want to just stick in that, I myself became involved with your program because I just found the whole idea of it very fascinating. And I am now sitting on a board. So, yeah,
Fantastic.
thank you. So, I just wanted to let listeners know it does work.
Very good.
Why should doctors and health professionals consider going on boards? They have their practice, they have, an insular world, they're busy with what they're doing. Why
Yeah.
should they look outside their world and outside their box and think, wow, sitting on a board might make sense for me. Why would it make sense?
So, look, I don't think it's just the medical profession. I think lots of us, as we go through our careers, we get very insular and focused on just what's on our narrow topic of expertise, and sort of the conventional wisdom is you just learn more and more about that piece. And I think some people, a lot of us kind of have this idea that when we get older and maybe when we're near a retirement, we'll go and sit on a few boards. And it's a secondary income, and it's a chance to have a bigger impact. I just encourage people to start that journey a lot sooner. And I think for any technical profession, sitting on the board of a company forces you to look holistically at how businesses work. And I think, oftentimes as employees, we're very focused on what we're technically good at, like helping a patient get better. But we don't necessarily understand the way that fits into the business. What is the business that we're in? And I think when you sit on the board, you're forced to have to understand a business from, where's the income coming in, where's it going out, how does the flow work, rather than just being super focused on the individual technical elements. And I think that's very useful. I think you actually become much better at your job, whatever your job is, when you understand the business side of it. So I think from that perspective, it's very good. Um, we also, one of the things you'll have heard me say many times is we encourage people to join boards of companies outside of their field of expertise. So if you're a doctor, go and join the board of an IT company or a food and beverage company, or something completely outside of it. Now that seems very counterintuitive, but there's a couple of reasons for it. The first is that it forces you to ask more questions, and the best board directors are the ones that ask the smartest questions. And so oftentimes when it's in our industry, we sort of jump to assumptions. We know how we think it should be done, and we know how we've seen it be done, and so we just jump to those assumptions. Whereas in a different industry, you kind of ask, well, why is it being done that way? That doesn't make any sense to me, and that can be quite useful. The other thing is that it stops you being dragged in as a consultant. So a director's job, or whether that's an advisory board position or an actual non-exec director, is to think about the business in a holistic manner and to think about all the stakeholders, which can be the shareholders, the clients, the staff. But if you know that industry and that company is facing a problem, because we're generally all nice people, it's very easy for us to say, well, hang on, look, I know how to fix this. Let me come in tomorrow and I can work with your team and fix it. And suddenly you've gone from being a non-exec director to being an employee or an unpaid consultant often. And when you're in an industry you don't know, you can't do that. And so it wouldn't occur to you to do that. It would occur to you to say, well, who do we know between us that would be great to come in and solve that problem, which is a much more constructive way of looking at it rather than being an unpaid consultant.
That's so true.
Unknown caller.
Sorry about that. Let me just turn that off.
So, there's a doctors ringing in already to say, yeah, I want to join.
Yeah, people weighing in now.
Yeah,
What you said makes so much sense also because, doctors tend to be very nurturing and they probably, want to say, hang on, if I can help you, I will. So having the advice where you're in a board where, you can't do that, helps everyone, really. Uh,
yeah, yeah.
for our listeners, could you explain the difference between an advisory board and being part of the board, board of directors? Because most of my listeners probably don't really know what the difference is, why
Sure.
you would want one over the other, and whether one has more power than the other. Like
Yeah.
what is it all about?
So let me give some context. I think a lot of people, when they think about boards, they're used to thinking about the boards of big companies. And if you look at traditional, if this is something you've thought about in the past, if you looked at traditional training, it would all be about um, good corporate governance for an S&P 500 company, which is fascinating, but it's completely irrelevant to 99.9% of all companies out there. Most companies in the world are small businesses. And so And the majority of companies in the world don't actually have a board. And yet every successful company you can think of does have a board. So there's a disconnect going on there. And I think so a lot of people think they should apply for these big companies that have boards, but if you imagine everyone that wants a board seat is all applying for the same very few jobs. And quite frankly, these companies never actually hire a random stranger. It's always people that they know, like, and trust. And so the way that we work with the Veblen Director Program is we say, look, we need to get you on the board ladder. And the way we do that is we're going to start with something super low key, super easy. You're just going to find a small business, a startup, an early stage business, could be a local pizzeria, it doesn't really matter. And you're going to create an advisory board, and we take the pressure right off. We say basically the way you position it to the founder is, look, myself and four or five other professionals from different industries, different countries, will just have a virtual coffee with you once a month, chat about your business, hopefully introduce you to some interesting people, see if we can give you some ideas, see if we can stop you making some mistakes that we've done in the past. And that's it, like a couple of hours a month maximum. And for individuals that are thinking about it, so for yourself, being able to say that you're sitting on that advisory board is a great stepping stone. You can update your LinkedIn profile. Suddenly your network is now looking at you in a completely different light than they were before. And that's really important because oftentimes your second and third board seat are going to come from people in your network who just didn't know that you're now looking for those opportunities. Um, but for the companies, it's really useful as well, because apart from obviously the knowledge and experience that you've got, now they're learning how to think in terms of how do I answer to a board, which for entrepreneurs, especially young entrepreneurs, we're not used to, like, we don't have that accountability. And so it's quite valuable to have that accountability. It also makes us look as a business more mature. So clients would rather go and work with a company that has a board of advisors. So you kind of get the credibility that comes with that board of advisors. Investors would definitely prefer that there was a board of advisors, even staff as well. So yeah, it's really kind of a stepping stone. And then once you're on it, there's various other steps that you can take, get up to a full director. Now, a full director is where you do take on some legal responsibility. So we start with advisory position. There's no legal worries. If the company goes bust, it goes bust. You're not responsible. When you're a director, you do have a fiduciary duty. And so you want to get some practice. You want to have those training wheels of being a board member before you actually agree to take on the legal responsibilities. And normally, there's D&O insurance, which is directors and officers insurance. You should also be being quite well compensated at that point for taking on that risk. But yeah, I tend to avoid it as even if you could, I wouldn't make it my first board seat because it's quite a big step up in terms of responsibilities and legal potential threats, especially in the US, which is more litigious than the rest of the world.
Well, some people might think, like I only have a small business, but like, hang on here. If I had an advisory board, I can get somebody to come in. I don't have to pay them, and they could tell me like how to take the next step forward and what I'm doing wrong, what I'm doing right, and help me about that. Does a business have to be a certain size before it makes sense to have an advisory board?
No, so and this is one of the things that we encourage all businesses, and this is even before I kind of started thinking about this as a business model. It was always my first bit of advice to entrepreneurs is even before you get your first client, build an advisory board around you. So if I launch a new business, and I have a very unhealthy habit of launching new businesses when I get bored, the first thing that I do is I build an advisory board around me. And that advisory board saves me so much time and effort and energy because I bring in people that have experience in that industry or that have experience with the clients that I want to get. And I can just bounce ideas off them. I say, look, hey, if I pitch this idea, what works, what doesn't work. So whatever size you're at, even if you haven't got your first customer, I think an advisory board is a useful tool to have. And I think it's also good for business owners. If you're ambitious and you want to grow your business, at some point you're going to have a board anyway. So learning how to regularly report to a board, learning how to utilize a board. And I think often people have this idea that board members are there to ruin their fun. And I think that's born out of kind of the where boards originated conceptually was if I'm a successful entrepreneur and I get to the end or I want to step back from the day-to-day running of it and I put an executive in charge to be the new CEO. um, I spent my life building this business. I'm terrified that CEO is going to make a stupid decision and destroy my life's work. And so I put a board in to be a sounding board and to kind of do some checks and balances and just make sure nothing bad happens. So that's what happens in big companies, and that's why a board, and I've been invited onto boards to maintain the status quo, which personally it doesn't interest me at all. But when you're starting out, you're joining companies that are growing. And at that point, you don't want to be a board member stopping them growing. You want to be helping them and helping the entrepreneur and making introductions and connecting them to potential partners and saying, hey, look, have you thought about this? And look, one of the companies I'm working with is doing this. I think you could apply that to yours. And really helping that founder to grow. And that's where you become super, super valuable. And um, yeah, and ultimately, basically, as the size of the company grows, as the market cap grows, your compensation grows with it, and it can be super lucrative as well.
So let's say I'm a small business. I have essentially no clientele, or maybe just like one or two. So
Mhm.
I'm really hoping that my new advisory board is going to, take me to that level. But if I were to look at people that have a tremendous amount of experience in all the facets that I need help with, but I really essentially have no, return on investment. I'm just like fledgling.
Mhm.
Why would these people be interested in sitting on a board to a business that's not really successful?
Yeah, so it's there's an element of managing expectations on both sides. So as an individual, if you decide that you want to be a board manager, a board director, you're not going to go and join the board of Microsoft as your first role and earn millions of dollars. That's not going to be the first step. You need to start lower down and get that experience and build up. Um, it, on the flip side of that, if you're a small business owner, you're not going to be able to bring in Elon Musk and Richard Branson to sit on your advisory board. Um, uh, doesn't matter how nicely you ask, it's just not going to happen. So on both sides, you've got people that want what they want out of the relationship. And so if you look at the Veblen Director Program, we've got these incredible people, and you've met lots of them. And so I think we've got nearly 300 people sitting on nearly 400 boards now. So, and they're all driven, they're ambitious, and yeah, a couple of years from now, they're going to be sitting on much bigger boards. And so that's an amazing network, but they're looking for these opportunities, and I think never underestimate why people will do this. So when I was starting out, I had a tech startup, and I was trying to raise capital, and I knew the value of getting this advisory board around me, and so I went to middle managers in highly respected brands. So Google, Microsoft, Yahoo. And what you discover is that these companies are full of middle managers that are bored out of their minds during the day. Like they're very good at what they do. They're very well paid, but they're all looking at entrepreneurs and wishing they could live their lives vicariously through you. And so when you say to them, hey, look, would you be interested in joining my advisory board? It's going to be like, I'll buy you a coffee once a month. That's all I can offer you. You would think they would say no, but actually to them, they can now update their LinkedIn profile and say, hey, I'm sitting on the board of such and such company. They've now got something really interesting to talk about at the dinner parties rather than project management software that they've got to upgrade. And so it suddenly becomes interesting. And when, as a small company, when you say you've got somebody from Microsoft, somebody from Yahoo, and somebody from Google on your board, the credibility you get from that, even if they were the janitors that I had got in, nobody asked me what roles they were in. It was just like, wow, you got Google on your board. Wow, that's pretty impressive. And I was actually able to raise capital at a 10. So I had been struggling to raise money at $1 million valuation. Once I had these board members on, nothing changed with the business, but I was able to raise money at a $10 million valuation just because I had the credibility of these big company brands around me. So
Well, I
uh,
think that that whole suggestion is brilliant. I do. It's not something that I might have considered, but you know, that is brilliant. So that segues to the next question is I see that you have a lot of experience in getting investors. How do you get investors?
yeah, so one of the things when we set up the Veblen Director Program, what I teach our members is how to get a board seat. But what I don't want is to have add to the non-effective board members that are out there. There's already plenty of those. So we want great board members. We want people that really know how to add value. And so a lot of our content is focused around how you add value. But one of the things that happens, especially with smaller businesses, is they're looking to raise capital, and very few people have experience of looking to raise capital. So I ended up launching another program called Guild Members, which is all about how you raise capital and specifically how you build networks of investors. Because what most businesses do is they kind of go at it back to front. They build the business and then they go out trying to find that 1 in a million investor that is looking for a business like theirs. And so what we say to the Veblen members is start building a network of investors and figure out what investors are looking for and then go and find that company. And that's a much, much easier way to do it than the other way around. Um, and so what happens is you kind of end up basically for our Veblen members, they're obviously connected to all the other Veblen members. They're also connected to this network of capital raisers, which means that when you're talking to these bigger companies that will eventually want to talk to you because you've now sitting on 3 or 4 boards and you're doing great stuff. And then you can say to them, well, look, I'm plugged into directors on hundreds of boards all around the world. I'm also plugged into this capital raising network. So regardless of your background, you're going to be of value to them just because of the connections that you have, and then everything else is a bonus on top of that.
Well, you have really opened up people's eyes that may not have even considered this route, or they may have, thought about it, but thought, I don't know anything about this. So, you being the expert could, take their hand and guide them through. How can people reach you?
So I'm always around on LinkedIn as probably the easiest place. But for any of your listeners, if they go to boardroom-blueprint.com, they can download a free copy of my book. You can buy it on Amazon, but I don't think Jeff needs any more money. So I'll give you a free copy if you go to boardroom-blueprint.com, and you'll get the audio and the digital book for free.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. This has really been a very exciting episode, and I'm sure others will find that to be the case too.
I
This
hope
has
so.
been another episode of Marketing Tips for Doctors with your host, Dr. Barbara Hales, and Callum Laing. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Barbara.